people when they get out. So we're stigmatizing them for the rest of their life for a small amount of drugs. It makes no sense. When we have an addict, when we have someone that truly needs some assistance, that person needs treatment. That person needs counseling, not incarceration. The stigma and the being labeled a felon is just another obstacle to their recovery. So we're setting them up for failure, and we do that with millions of people. And then think about the families. Think about the children of these offenders. Think about the spouses of these people. Those are also people caught in this terrible war that we don't often think about, but those are often the most tragic stories, is the families that get ruined by these arrests and these
and I always find it really laughable that the so-called party of family values are the same ones that push for these insane drug laws that basically rip families apart.
Absolutely.
Good fathers, good mothers being taken away from their children for weeks, years, months at a time, sometimes decades.
Yep.
Let's not kid ourselves. If you happen to have an ounce of weed in your house and also happen to have a box of Ziploc baggies that you use to package up your kids' lunch.
Yep.
That can be considered grounds for we're going to charge you distribution.
Right.
You have all of the means at your disposal.
Right.
All you're doing is throwing a PBJ in that sandwich bag and throwing it in your kid's lunch.
Right.
It's just amazing to me how these laws get abused by law enforcement, particularly in prosecutorial phase, get abused by the boots on the ground law enforcement, the cops that are coming into the home.
Right.
Probable cause when a police officer enters your home, probable cause is a really low number. To see that one roach in an ashtray, that water pipe sitting on a shelf is probable cause. They can now search your home for whatever they choose.
And let's use that as a segue to go on to the next social implication of the failed war on drugs. When you study some of the statistics about the levels of incarceration or the punishment accorded to members of the inner city or certain ethnic or racial communities as a result of this low barrier to probable cause, compare that to white upper middle class suburbs and the same type of crimes, yet other studies would indicate that they're both occurring at the same pace.
Yep.
You start to understand why you have Baltimore, why you have this rash of hatred between members of the inner city, all right, white, black, or as we found out last weekend when we had the folks from Providence in, of the Asian community, against local law enforcement because they're using these lifestyle, quote-unquote, air-quote crimes, all right, as a blunt force trauma tool to inflict the police into the homes of that entire community. So look at what's happened in our cities lately, because the folks who live in the inner city see police departments as an invasive force.
Absolutely.
They do not see them as officer-friendly. They do not see them as the dare cop. They do not see them as their friend. They see them as someone who's there to turn them into a statistic. So cities like Baltimore, cities like Staten Island and Brooklyn and New York City, all across the country we see racial unrest that can be as a direct trigger of the failed war on drugs.
Absolutely.
What's been the cost of that to this country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're seeing the cost of it. We're seeing these cities burn, and you're seeing that there's just a huge outpouring of rage. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't also bring up the asset forfeiture laws that we've seen tear apart communities as well. So, a lot of folks don't understand this, but a police officer that finds someone with just a wad of cash, no drugs, no necessarily any other evidence, just a wad of cash, they can say that they're suspecting that that's involved in a drug deal. They can seize that cash and anything else that's involved. They can seize cars, they can seize homes, and they've done this. There was just a story a couple of days ago about a young man who was in Chicago. He had saved up $16,000 to start his career in the music industry. He was taking a train to L.A., He's black, of course. He got searched and singled out by the cops who were searching the train. They found his $16,000. Didn't find anything else. Found no drugs. Found no evidence that he had used drugs or anything like that. They seized his money and took away this kid's dream of being in the music industry simply because of this law. Now, they don't have to even convict you of a drug charge to keep that money. They just have to say, we had reasonable suspicion. And they basically say, well, who else would have a wad of cash except the drug dealer? Well, This kid had a wad of cash because he was leaving to L.A. He was taking his savings and he was going to another city.
Or
This
somebody
happens-
like me who just doesn't trust banks.
Or exactly, right. There's all sorts of reasons. So parents who have had heroin, their son or daughter is addicted to heroin, living in their home. They've had their home taken away by police officers, again, without any charge, actually, without any conviction. And so this is, again, a product of the war on drugs is our civil rights and our civil liberties have just been decimated, and communities of color, especially poor communities of color in the inner city, have felt this more than anyone else, to the point where they feel like the police are their enemy.
Absolutely. Now, okay, we talk about them becoming part of the criminal justice system. How much do we spend on prisons versus, I don't know, fixing schools or God forbid, taking folks who have addiction problems with other drugs,
right,
all right, and treating them? I mean, speak to that, if you will. The incredible industry, much of it private industry.
Yes.
Tied, and here's the thing, we hate crony capitalism. And so if folks are trading on insider connections to become the prison industrial complex for the United States and essentially, through that privatization are making outsized profits, being intellectually honest libertarians, all right, we see a problem there, all right, which is why we're at the forefront of fighting things like the stadium and these idiot trolley car ideas and all that other stuff in Providence. So speak to that, if you will, the prison system. I mean, how big is our prison system in this country?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. Again, 2.3 million people are under the thumb of the criminal justice system. A lot of that is for drug offenses. And just think about the perverse incentive that you have with these private prisons where, they're literally making money off of people being arrested for drugs and incarcerated for drugs. So, of course, they're going to support
because they're subsidized per prisoner.
Exactly. So, in Rhode Island, fortunately, the private prison sort of complex hasn't really stuck its roots here yet. We do have a public prison, but in places like California, for instance, in the last decade, they built 22 prisons and only one university. I mean, it's a total imbalance of spending and money.
Well, I would say that there's a corollary in the public prison system as well, because if prison population goes up, then hey, the budget has to go up too.
Right.
So
the correctional officers union has
there's that the old nut in the public sector. Well, we could streamline and we could save some money, but then they're going to cut our budget next year.
Exactly. They're going to lay off workers, so we can't let them do that.
Right.
We
so
have
we
to
need to spend every dime and show that we need to increase our budget every year, and so there's a similar corollary in the public prison system.
Absolutely. And hey, we could expand. Let's incarcerate more people so that we can build more prisons. I mean, that sort of logic is just perverse on every level. So
let me just jump in here we haven't done in a little while a station ID, if you will. If you're just tuning in, of course, you're listening to RIFreeRadio.org, a very special edition of the Coalition taking place at canna-con at the Providence Convention Center here in scenic Metropolitan Stadium and trolley car free Providence, Rhode Island. 2 days, by the way. This will be going on until about 5 or 6 o'clock this afternoon. If you're in Providence and looking for education, you've got a lot of happy people here providing education, information, training on all levels, particularly related to medical cannabis.
Or if you just need a new one-hitter or a new glass pipe, hey, stop on by.
We can be found at coalitionradio.us, RIFreeRadio.org, the Coalition Radio Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. And, of course, as Tony Jones likes to put it, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio. Of course, we'll be on WPRO AM 630, 99.7 FM this evening at 6 o'clock at the Bryan Shrine in East Providence with none other than Stephen Brown, the head of the Rhode Island American Civil Liberties Union chapter. Joining us right now, of course, is Jared Moffitt, the Grand Poobah, the High Exalted Ruler Chief Water Buffalo of Regulate Rhode Island. And we're going through a lot of we call them the bogeymen, the urban myths and legends that surround, that essentially politicians and connected interests using fear to confuse and obfuscate the real issues surrounding the regulation of cannabis. The two dirtiest words in the human language, if you're a libertarian, as the three of us are here, is the ad council. All right? Any idea how much money the ad council has spent on
This is your
bizarre-
brain on drugs
Right. In other
commercials.
words, making
I learned
sure
it from watching
How
you.
many perfectly good eggs have been wasted?
making sure that politically connected advertising agencies and radio stations are fed money and work to, again, create the big lie.
It's a huge budget. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I do know that there was a study done looking at some of these ads and actually found a counterproductive result. That means that those kids who were exposed to these ads were actually more disposed to use
Hey,
drugs
good
later.
idea.
Right?
I really
they
need
said,
to chill
that looks
out."
cool. There's an alien and he's flying after he used marijuana, so maybe I could do that. I mean, it's-
I want to melt into the couch.
right. Just made it more appealing to kids, so it's outrageous.
Now, the next level, of course, is the geopolitical implications. This past 2 years, we've been treated, and I use that term loosely, because this has been an area of a deadly serious issue here, particularly in the Northeast, where you've had a grotesque displacement of people from Central and Latin America to the United States as a result of the drug wars, the cartel wars, particularly in Mexico. How did that happen, Jared?
It happened because we escalated it, because the United States essentially went to these Latin American countries and they said, either you allow us to fund your military to fight these drug cartels, or we're going to basically screw you with our trade deals. And so what happened is these countries accepted the military training to go after these drug cartels. And of course what happens, it's like a hydra. As soon as you cut off the head and take out one of the leaders, like we saw with Pablo Escobar, you just see more heads start to spring up. You just create more competition for the top position. And so now you have increasingly violent cartels competing with each other in the region, and it's really one of the most tragic foreign policy failures of our era.
Well, and if you militarize the law enforcement, then the
Right.
cartel's most logical move is to militarize themselves.
Exactly.
So now you see these cartels with body armor and their own SWAT teams and
Right.
automatic weapons and
Right.
and you name it.
Yep, and corrupting the government, and that's what you see is an alliance between right now the Zetas and the Mexican government is what's happening. So
Right, and caught in the crossfire is an entire generation of innocent civilians who feel compelled to send their children to the United States, which, of course, has resulted in yet another health crisis because these folks are very often from the poorest portions of Central America. They're undocumented. They have no really legitimate health system in the parts of the country they're coming from. So they're importing disease, pestilence, yet they're human beings. So that it's not right to just dismiss them as some sort of plague. If they are a plague, it's a plague that we've caused, that we've
Exactly.
created in the test tubes that are the criminal justice system and the halls of foreign policy here in the United States. So they come to the United States. You know, we had a child die in Cumberland. You know, and again, they've never drawn the connection, but it was suspiciously close to an outbreak that occurred across the country. And then, of course, these children.
I'm still
are-
blaming the anti-vaxxers on that.
Well, then you had these children dropped into our educational system, which is already overburdened, already crumbling, because we're spending all sorts of money to create a war on drugs, which is what started the whole vicious cycle in the first place.
Exactly.
So when the hell are we going to learn? And when the hell are people going to just get pissed off and say, screw this?
yeah, well, one thing I am excited about, I mean, I share your outrage. One thing I'm excited about is in 2016, the United Nations is going to have a special session on drug policy. So this is going to be really revolutionary because the last time they had a special session on drug policy was 98. And what they decided, what the conclusion of that convention was, we're going to eradicate drugs from the planet. That was their concluding mission. And obviously, in the intervening years, a lot of leaders from Latin America have realized that that strategy just destroys their country. It just decimates those communities. And so we have a chance now in 2016, in April next year, to redefine what the global drug treaties look like. And we have finally a chance to go backwards and step back from this war on drugs approach and take a more sensible approach.
Which is why politics is so important. Because if we have, and this is speaking as a libertarian who has an issue with conservative Republicans, if we take the same knee-jerk, Paleolithic, Dave, what do we like to call it? Binary thinking.
The knuckle dragging, mouth breathing, binary thinking troglodyte.
Troglodyte political approach to the war on drugs. Guess what? It's going to happen all over again.
Yep.
And we'll be having the same conversation 10 years from now.
Yep.
All right? That's if I'm still alive. But the the solution, as is in many cases, complicated to enact, but